I will stop the invasion of criminals coming into our country. I will rescue every city and town that has been invaded and conquered. On day one, I will launch the largest deportation program of criminals in the history of our country.
It's been a pretty straightforward campaign promise from day one. Now it looks like President-elect Donald Trump is ready to call in the military to help him carry it out. I'm Gadi Schwartz, and this is Stay Tuned Now. As President-elect Donald Trump's plans for the country come into focus, he continues to quickly fill up his cabinet. A short time ago, he named former Wisconsin Congressman and Fox Business host Sean Duffy to head up the Department of Transportation. Meanwhile, lots of questions in the recent days about how President-elect Donald Trump will implement his promise of mass deportations. Well, today, he confirmed his plan to use the military in some form or another to help in his plans for mass deportation with one word on X, which was formerly called Twitter, at 4 this morning. Trump commented with the word true to a post on his Truth Social platform. He was responding to an earlier post saying his administration would declare a national emergency and use military assets for his mass deportation program. This comes as Trump is filling up his cabinet fast with some immigration hardliners like incoming border czar Tom Homan, who recently said families should be deported together, and South Dakota Governor Kristi Noem for DHS Secretary, who is also well known for her stance on illegal immigration. Let's bring in NBC's David Noriega to help break this down. David, talk to us about the latest developments here. What does Trump mean by the word true in his post?
So I'm getting serious flashbacks to the last time Trump was elected and covering immigration the last time Trump was elected, because he will often make very big and very alarming pronouncements that raise way more questions than answers, right? And often in response to a prompt from somebody else rather than actually issuing a proclamation of his own, as he did here. So to kind of unpack this a little bit, first of all, a president cannot simply use the military for domestic law enforcement, which is what immigration is. There's a law called the Posse Comitatus Act that dates back to the 19th century that prevents the use of the military for domestic law enforcement. There are ways that a president can and presidents have used the military for immigration enforcement. Trump himself did so by deploying the National Guard to the border to put up razor wire and support the Border Patrol in their border enforcement duties. The main thing that an emergency declaration does is allow the president to divert funds to other purposes. Now, I think it's very likely that he'll do exactly that again for border enforcement, but that's relatively marginal. It doesn't actually make that much of a difference, and it's been done before. Another way that the military could be used, and Stephen Miller, for example, his policy advisor, the main kind of immigration behind-the-scenes guy, has mentioned wanting to do, is using the military and or the National Guard to build large detention spaces, temporary detention spaces, which would relieve one of the major backlogs in the immigration enforcement system, which
Army
is the
Corps of Engineers style size incarceration camps, or
they call them
centers?
Yes, exactly. The term of art is soft-sided facilities, which are basically like big tents out in the desert or near metropolitan areas that are theoretically temporary and that don't involve having to build an actual functioning prison type space. That would help with one of the main bottlenecks in the immigration enforcement system, which is that ICE doesn't have enough detention space. Now, that said, it's hard to tell exactly at this point what the gap is between the statements and the reality, because there are a lot of obstacles to instituting a mass deportation plan like the one that Trump has been talking about. It doesn't mean he's not going to try. He almost certainly is going to try, but there are a lot of obstacles to actually putting it into motion.
Biggest obstacle always when it comes to Congress is money, right? And Trump has said to NBC News that this has no price tag. How much are we talking here for this to be covered?
Well, the existing American immigration enforcement system already costs tens of billions of dollars, right? And again, the main thing that an emergency declaration would do is allow the president to divert funds from other places without having to get those funds, legally apportioned by Congress. And I would also say that aside from the money, even if he had all the money in the world with no problems whatsoever, there are also operational and logistical constraints. For example, right now, one of the reasons that the immigration enforcement system is so dysfunctional is because the immigration courts are severely backlogged, like severely years worth of backlogs, to the point that if you are given a date to appear in court and you fight your deportation, you might get a court date 2 or 3 years into the future, right? money alone doesn't solve that problem. You need immigration judges, you need infrastructure to have that system work the way that it would need to work to deport people at this scale. Unless, of course, the administration starts trying to deport people circumventing the due process of the immigration courts, in which case they will encounter legal obstacles. So there are financial obstacles, legal obstacles, logistical obstacles, and political obstacles. They are doubtless going to encounter those obstacles. The question is, how are they going to try to get around them?
And when it comes to the political obstacles, I mean, you've got Congress, both sides of both chambers are majority Republican now. Is there anything that lawmakers can do to stop or slow any of this down, or does this seem like a done deal?
Well, is there something they can do? Yes. Will they? That's a different question. Because not only is it a Republican trifecta, I think one of the main things that has changed since the last time is that the political winds have changed. And I try not to be in the business of making predictions, but I expect that there will be less formal Democratic Party resistance to Trump's immigration agenda this time than there was the last time, because of how much public opinion shifted on this question during the Biden administration. And I wouldn't be surprised if Trump got some support, not just from the Republicans in Congress, but even some Democrats in Congress for his immigration agenda during these first 2 years of his term.
That context is so important. David, thanks so much for joining us. And let's now bring in NBC News legal analyst Danny Savalas to help us understand a lot of the legality here. Danny, so what is the legal basis behind mass deportation? How far can the Trump administration go with this?
Well, David Noriega did a fantastic job of laying out some of the law, so I'll try to bat a little cleanup, but he laid it out really well. And that it is a challenge, the idea of mass deportations. The big question is, and in fact, some groups have already filed, the ACLU has already filed a lawsuit seeking more information about how this will actually happen. So until it actually begins, it's hard to anticipate the legal challenges to something like mass deportation. As David pointed out, there are limitations to using things like the military under the Posse Comitatus Act. Then, of course, there are resource limitations on things like courts being congested. And if there is a due process violation, then a lawsuit can seek an injunction, a restraining order. And that's really what I think you're going to see a lot of. Yes, as much as Trump goes for mass deportations, you're going to see lawsuits immediately. In fact, you can read reports right now. There are plenty of groups already preparing lawsuits, but the magic word is going to be injunction. You're likely going to see early on courts issue injunctions, because in deciding to issue an injunction, which is something that prevents somebody from doing something, one of the things they consider is irreparable harm. If we don't preserve the status quo, will there be irreparable harm? And this is exactly almost the definition of irreparable harm. If you take somebody out of the country and put them far out of the jurisdiction of this country, somewhere else where they may never be found again.
So much of this is still nebulous and speculatory, but we've been reporting that Trump plans on ending at least 2 Biden-era immigration programs, which allowed about 1.3 million people to enter the United States legally under that CBP-1 program with the app. And then there was also the program, the Cuba, Haiti, Nicaragua, Venezuela parole program. So what happens to those pending cases? Let's say you came in, you were going to claim asylum, you got your appointment through CBP-1, you crossed, you had your first initial interaction with law enforcement or with ICE or Border Patrol, and now you're stuck in this waiting period. What happens then?
Yeah, well, federal law provides some protection for asylees. It treats them differently, and they have some rights under federal law that even Trump, with a ban or an executive order, can't necessarily override. But then you have to talk about also incentives. If you end the CBP app, then what happens next? Not legally, but practically speaking, because that really, the study of law is a study of incentives. We punish things we don't want people to do, and we incentivize things that we want people to do, like tax breaks or something else. So if you cancel the CBP app program, what does that do? It might create it might create more illegal immigration. If people are not given a lawful means to pursue, you'll take those people that otherwise would have pursued the lawful means, and they'll say, the heck with it, I'll just make a run and try to get across the border. So you have incentives that come up, issues with that. And then, of course, you have the issue that some of the asylees may have legal protections that even Trump can't override with a wave of his hand.
A lot to watch out for there. Danny Savalas, thank you. And it looks like the president-elect is sticking with his cabinet choices despite a storm of controversy and shaky support in Washington. And that includes his pick for Secretary of Defense, Fox News co-host Pete Hegseth, even after the news that he allegedly sexually assaulted a woman in 2017 in an interaction he claims was consensual. But over the weekend, his lawyer confirmed Hegseth paid the woman as part of a settlement agreement. The big question now, how does this all play out with a new Republican majority in the Senate? NBC's Dasha Burns joins us now. Dasha, what are you hearing about support in the Senate and from Trump himself here?
Well, look, when it comes to Democrats, they are unlikely to vote for Hegseth for confirmation. However, the posture from Republicans has largely been one of hedging. They are not saying that they're not going to vote for him. They're not also saying he's a great pick necessarily. Let's take the example from over the weekend of Senator Markwayne Mullins on Meet the Press with our colleague Kristen Welker. She asked him about these allegations. He said, yeah, they could potentially sink his confirmation. But when it came to his opinion personally, he said he thinks he's a good pick and wants to see the process play out. That is largely what we've been seeing from Republican senators. Now, President-elect Trump, he is sticking by his picks. He is not wavering here. We got a statement from his communications director saying Mr. Hegseth has vigorously denied any and all accusations and no charges were filed. We look forward to seeing his confirmation. So no hedging from President-elect and his team.
And shifting a little bit to the policy side of things, he's made a lot of waves with his views on women in combat. In fact, here's what he said just a few days ago. Take a look.
You don't like women in combat?
No.
Why not?
I love women service members who contribute amazingly because everything about men and women serving together makes the situation more complicated, and complication in combat means casualties are worse.
Hegseth went on to say that women have a place in the military, just not in special operations, artillery, infantry, armor units. So what's the reaction been like as that's starting to make the rounds?
Well, not surprisingly, it's not going over so well with women who have served in the military. Take a listen.
This is not the Revolutionary War where there's some sort of a line in the sand and, you know, combat is on one side and the rest of us can stay behind this line, and that's not combat. I would ask him, you know, where do you think I lost my legs?
It's an age-old story of people making the decision not to serve anymore because they served under poor leadership. And so poor leadership that high up in the ranks could really have some cascading effects on the all-volunteer force.
And look, Gadi, this is a really important pick for President-elect Trump. He was very frustrated with the people in charge of the military in his first administration, and it's been a priority for him to install folks that are more loyal to him, that he feels are more in line with his vision for the military of the United States, Gadi.
And Dasha, it seems pretty early to talk about this, but it does seem like there might be talk of backup plans, right? Here's Donald Trump Jr. Take a look.
Listen, there's always, ideas. We have lists of people. We're not just randomly picking a name out of a hat. We're showing him lists of 10 or 12 people for every position. So we do have backup plans, but I think we're obviously going with the strongest candidates first. Some of them are going to be controversial. They're controversial because they'll actually get things done.
So what kind of names are on those lists that are being floated around as maybe a potential plan B for SecDef or for any other cabinet positions?
Well, look, Gadi, one source described the scene at Mar-a-Lago to me recently as a Game of Thrones. There are a lot of people jockeying for positions right now. As we've been reporting out transition picks and potential transition picks, we have a number of names for each one of those positions. But I think fundamentally, President-elect Trump and his team, they are going to forcefully push these current choices forward. It's largely going to be a loyalty test. We've already heard the president-elect and others saying, look, the reason why the Senate is in Republican hands, the reason why Senate Leader Thune is in his leadership position is because of Trump's massive victory. So look for them to lean on that and to put a lot of pressure on Republicans in Congress to make it happen for them. Gadi?
Dasha Burns, thank you. And turning now to the president-elect's pick for Attorney General, Matt Gaetz. On Wednesday, the House Ethics Committee meets to debate its report into his alleged sexual misconduct and illicit drug use. Now, they've been investigating Gaetz since 2021, but that probe was thrown into limbo when he resigned from Congress on Thursday, which effectively ended the investigation. Earlier today, NBC's Hallie Jackson spoke with a lawyer representing several women who testified to a House panel about Gaetz's behavior. Here's some of what he said about a party his client attended.
One of the first things that happened when she got to the party, she testified to the House that within minutes of arriving, she was introduced to Matt Gaetz, and they went upstairs and had sexual intercourse on the bed, after which she went downstairs. There was some testimony about things that took place, but eventually at some point she was walking outside to go to the pool area, and to the right she witnessed Representative Gaetz having sex with her friend who was 17 at the time.
Now, Gaetz has denied any wrongdoing. Joining us now is Capitol Hill correspondent Ryan Nobles. So that's what we've heard publicly. What have lawmakers heard? What else do we know about the allegations here?
Well, we know the House Ethics Committee has heard a lot, Gadi. They've heard from multiple witnesses. They've collected a lot of evidence over the course of this lengthy investigation. And we know that Senate Republicans in particular would like to see what they have compiled. And of course, this is all being held up right now by the House Ethics Committee, which is hamstrung a bit because Matt Gaetz resigned from Congress, so they no longer have jurisdiction over him. They have the opportunity to investigate a fellow member for ethical violations while they are in office, but once they leave office, they don't have that same ability. But there is an open question as to what they can do with this report that they've compiled. There's some question as to whether or not the report is complete, if it's ready to go and be released to the public. But the House Ethics Committee, as you point out, is going to meet later this week to discuss what the next path forward is. I know one thing for sure, and that's that Senate Republicans that are going to vote on this confirmation, they at least want the information behind what has been compiled by the House during this lengthy investigation before they cast their vote.
And some sources are telling NBC News that internally, several Senate Republicans are saying they don't right now see a path forward for him to be confirmed as Attorney General. What's the latest there?
Yeah, I think that's true. I think they are all saying that behind closed doors, but I don't know how much faith we can put in that at the end of the day. These are the same Senate Republicans who time and time again talk tough behind closed doors, but then when push comes to shove and they're forced to take a position that is contrary to the wishes of Donald Trump, they often cave. And I could point to multiple examples of that taking place over the time that Donald Trump has been in politics, particularly since 2016. The thing that I keep pointing to when we talk about this is that there's not a single Republican senator that has come forward and said that they were definitively no on any of these nominees, not just Matt Gaetz, but the other controversial nominees as well. And so in my mind, that means that all of them at this point still have a path to confirmation. Now, it is completely reasonable that they would want to hear testimony in hearings, that they want to look at any evidence or background check that goes into the process of nominating these very important cabinet officials before making an actual prediction or to come out publicly whether or not they're a yes or a no. But the fact that they're talking about it publicly and not taking that similar stance, the fact that they're talking about it privately and are not taking that similar stance publicly, to me, means that there's still a chance that every single one of these nominees could be confirmed.
Yeah, that speaks volumes there. Let's listen to House Speaker Johnson addressing the House report yesterday.
Number one, my understanding is that the report is not finished. It's in a rough draft form, was not yet ready to be released. And since Matt Gaetz left the Congress, I don't think it's appropriate to do so.
Ryan, there's also the issue of recess appointments here, right? What are the chances of all of this becoming moot if Trump is able to appoint without confirmation?
Well, he still can't do that without the help of Congress, right, Gadi? So the big problem here is that Senate Republicans are going to have to decide whether or not they're going to capitulate to Trump on these cabinet nominations. And if they're not in favor of these cabinet nominations and they don't want to vote yes, but instead they vote to adjourn to open the door to Trump voting these folks in without Senate confirmation, well, then they're in many ways advocating their responsibilities as a co-equal branch of government and the advise and consent role of the United States Senate. Now, that could happen. That is certainly an option that is on the table. It is something that Senate Republicans have said that they're not ruling out. But we need to be very clear-eyed about this. If they blame Democrats for standing in the way of these nominations going through and then use the recess appointment excuse as a reason to get there, well, that's simply not true. They are going to have enough Republican votes to confirm every single one of these nominees. They only need 51 Republican votes. They're likely going to have 53. So if they take the recess appointment route, that is because Senate Republicans are opposed to these nominees, not the Democrats. And so it just would speak volumes as to how this Republican caucus is going to interact with Donald Trump over the course of his administration.
Yeah, sounds like a very loud no with a wink, wink and a nudge, nudge. Ryan Nobles reporting from Capitol Hill for us tonight. Ryan, thank you. And in New York City, 2 people are dead tonight, and a 3rd person is in critical condition after police say a homeless man went on an unprovoked stabbing spree at 3 different locations across Manhattan. Now, surveillance footage before the attack shows the suspect putting on gloves and trying to stash a large kitchen knife. He's since been arrested. NBC's Antonia Hilton has the latest.
Gadi, all of this started just minutes before 8:30 a.m. this morning. According to authorities, the suspect, Ramon Rivera, started on the west side of Manhattan and attacked a 36-year-old construction worker who was right in front of his work site, entirely unprovoked. That man is now dead. He then proceeded on foot to walk across to the other side of Manhattan on the west side by the East River, where he attacked a 68-year-old man who was just out fishing. And that was just before he came here, minutes before 11 a.m., to the corner where I am right now, and attacked a 36-year-old woman, the only one of the victims who is still alive at this point. According to authorities, she is still fighting for her life in a New York City hospital. Take a listen to one of the eyewitnesses describing what the scene was like today.
He put his hands up. He went on the ground, no struggle, no anything. He didn't fight the cops. Went on his stomach. And then they opened the bag. And as soon as they opened the bag and they dumped it upside down, a mask came out and 2 really big knives. And one of them, like I said, looked like it had blood on it.
And according to authorities, Rivera has an extensive history of charges involving burglaries and of mental health challenges. He was also homeless, living in the Bellevue men's shelter here in New York City recently. Mayor Eric Adams questioned in a presser this morning why this man was able to be out on the street given his history and known challenges. And our team spoke to people out in this area. As you can see behind me here, this is a residential and very busy community here in New York City. All night as we've been here, people have been going by with their kids, babies in strollers, many of them absolutely shocked and horrified by what happened here in the city today, but grateful that Rivera, the suspect, is now behind bars. Gadi.
Antonia Hilton, thank you. And don't go anywhere. We are just getting started. Up next, we're going to give you an update on those wildfires burning on both coasts and tell you about some big new AI tech that is being used to fight back. Plus, everything you need to know about that E. coli outbreak linked to carrots at some major grocery stores. And yes, that does include baby carrots. And later this hour, we're going to tell you about the new safety guidelines coming from Roblox.
If your children are playing Roblox or are on the computer, please start checking and seeing what they're playing. I found out that my daughter was talking to, a boy, a girl, and they were asking her some really nasty things.
Hey, welcome back. And here are some of the other headlines we're watching tonight. A neo-Nazi group marched through Columbus, Ohio on Saturday, chanting slurs and carrying Nazi flags. Videos show at least 11 masked individuals in the city's art district shouting anti-Semitic and racist messages. Officials, including President Biden and Ohio's governor, condemned that display as a threat to U.S. values. And a New York judge has delayed Steve Bannon's criminal trial, now set for February 25th. Bannon faces charges of defrauding donors who thought that they were funding a border wall, while prosecutors say he used the money for personal gain. Bannon denied the charges, calling them politically motivated, but if convicted, he faces up to 15 years in prison. And Spirit Airlines has filed for bankruptcy, citing mounting losses, debt, and a failed merger with JetBlue. The airline says operations and ticket sales will continue as normal, with plans to emerge from bankruptcy early in 2025. And X, formerly known as Twitter, filed a lawsuit against California last week. It is challenging the state law that requires social media to take down election-related contents made of deep fake technology. X is calling the law unconstitutional and says it violates the First and 14th Amendments. And a bomb cyclone is approaching the west coast, and that could bring gusty winds up to 70 miles an hour, heavy rain and snow. And it comes as the threat of an atmospheric river looms, which are those long water vapors. It could dump huge amounts of rain on the west coast. And tonight, New York City is under a drought warning, putting the city of more than 8 million people just one level away from a drought emergency. Now, this is due to record-setting dry conditions that have been fueling wildfires across the Northeast and dwindling reserves for weeks now. That includes the Jennings Creek wildfire that's been burning on the New York-New Jersey border, threatening homes and leading to voluntary evacuations there. NBC's Emily Akeda has the latest.
Hey there. Well, this part of New York remains under a state of emergency. Schools in the area are closed again today, and firefighting crews are sticking close to neighborhoods in an effort to protect homes that are threatened by fires. You might be able to make out along the lakeside there are homes that were evacuated over the weekend after strong, powerful wind gusts pushed flames even past containment lines.
This morning, firefighters gaining ground on the Jennings Creek fire, now nearly 90% contained in both New York and New Jersey. But the National Weather Service warning dry, windy conditions across the Northeast remain a threat to spread the flames and ignite new fires.
We have another wind event coming, so obviously there's concern there.
Officials say the wildfire is the largest in New York in 16 years, with fire crews from as far as Montana and Colorado on the ground and in the air working to manage it. Helicopters with New York's National Guard dropping more than 50,000 gallons of water.
It's very rocky, very steep, makes it very difficult for us to get hand crews in, much less even trying to get engines or UTVs into a lot of spots.
Over the weekend, flames jumping containment lines because of the wind, prompting voluntary evacuations still in effect that impacted over 160 homes in the neighboring town of Warwick. More than half of the Northeast remains under moderate drought, with red flag warnings on Saturday impacting over 40 million people. Crews managing localized brush fires in other states like Massachusetts and Connecticut. Now this morning, with the fire threat far from gone, officials hope rain in the near forecast will help them get the job done.
We're trying to control and contain Mother Nature.
And just south of here, New York City's fire commissioner announcing that it is launching their first ever brush fire task force after the FDNY responded to a record 271 brush fires across the city in just a 2-week period. The good news, it does appear there is some rain in the forecast, up to a half an inch later this week. It's welcomed help for these dry landscape and strained firefighting crews. Back to you.
Yeah. Very welcome, Emily. Thank you. And as these wildfires continue to rage across the country, a new partnership is looking to use some AI to fight those flames. And CNBC's Julia Borstein shows us now.
Wildfires continue to ravage the country, causing the loss of thousands of lives and billions of dollars of damage. This year, over 8 million acres have already burned, up from about 3 million acres burned last year and above the 5- and 10-year averages. Now, tech companies, public utilities, and government agencies are using new artificial intelligence tools to fight back. Pano AI is a startup that deploys cameras in high-risk areas, charging $50,000 per year for one of its camera stations. Its software detects smoke and fires at the earliest stages, sending notifications to local fire departments to drastically speed up response times.
It's just not practical to build thousands of lookout towers staffed with humans, but it's extremely practical to put up lightweight camera systems and monitor them 24/7 with powerful AI combined with human intelligence to deliver the best of both worlds.
Portland General Electric has become one of Pano AI's top customers. The utility company has deployed dozens of cameras, saying in some instances it's helped fire departments respond to fires as much as 6 hours faster.
By notifying the fire agencies, because all that happens in real time, you get such better collaboration on helping minimize the impact of the fires, not just from a people and property perspective, but to the grid itself.
Microsoft's AI for Good lab has also been developing AI to detect fires and respond in their aftermath. In the wake of last year's Maui wildfires, the lab's AI was able to analyze satellite imagery to notify the Red Cross about local damage to best target response efforts.
This type of information is very critical for them.
some of these maps would have taken them weeks to do without these tools, and now you can get information in hours.
There are plenty of headwinds, an increase in the total number of fires because of climate change, and the country is struggling with a firefighter shortage. Plus, these tools can't necessarily prevent fires from starting. But AI can dramatically mitigate fires' damage, hopefully easing the burden on first responders.
Julia Borstein reporting. Thank you so much, Julia. And coming up, a new outbreak of E. coli is being linked to carrots, and they are being linked at some pretty popular grocery stores. We're going to tell you about that next, but first you got to see this. Well, these guys, they might seem like your average adorable fluffy bunnies hopping around in the snow, but as it turns out, in Anchorage, Alaska, these feral rabbits are actually up to no good. This specific colony is huge. It lives near an elementary school. It's distracting students during lessons. They're trying to learn, and they ate $100,000 worth of landscaping. Huh. We'll be right back. And there's been another E. coli outbreak you should know about. This time, bagged organic carrots sold at grocery stores, including Trader Joe's and Wegmans. At least 39 people have been reported sick with E. coli across 18 states, and one person has died. NBC's Ann Thompson has more.
Oh my God, another freaking E. coli outbreak.
Warnings spreading on social media about some organic carrots.
You guys should check your refrigerator.
Possibly tainted with E. coli. The outbreak linked to the death of a Los Angeles County adult over 65 with medical conditions. 39 cases in 18 states are under investigation, 15 people hospitalized. The company recall involves bagged whole and baby organic carrots produced by Grimway Farms and sold at some of America's most popular stores, Whole Foods, Trader Joe's, and Wegmans, to name a few. No longer thought to be in stores, the fear is they could be in your refrigerator or freezer. If so, the CDC says throw them out. Food safety expert Ben Chapman.
Unfortunately, washing produce doesn't eliminate the issue. It might reduce the risk a little bit, but that is really the issue that we have with fresh produce, is that we can't wash it off.
This follows the E. coli outbreak at McDonald's, linked to slivered onions on Quarter Pounders. The company says it is spending $100 million on a recovery plan.
With these two outbreaks, should we be worried about our nation's vegetable supply?
I wouldn't say that we should be worried about our nation's vegetable supply. I will say that fresh produce always provides us with complications.
Complications that can't be washed away. Ann Thompson, NBC News.
And let's bring in NBC News medical contributor, Dr. Kavita Patel. Dr. Patel, thanks so much for joining us. What do you mean can't be washed away? I mean, I have Trader Joe's baby carrots in my fridge. It is like one of the first things we get when we go shopping. If somebody thinks they've eaten these carrots or they might have them in their fridge, like, what do you do?
Yeah, so the reason you really shouldn't try to attempt to cook them or wash it away is because cross-contamination is very easy with E. coli. Think about E. coli as being just incredibly sticky, and where even when you try with all good consciousness, gloves and all, it just runs too much of a risk of there being actually more spread, not less. That's why we recommend bag it up, throw it away, or if you have symptoms, bring that in with you, because public health officials can run testing to make sure that's really the source of your infection.
Is there a way for people to be ahead of the curve when it comes to keeping tabs on what foods are being investigated for contamination? Because it does seem like, I mean, all of my favorite spots are getting hit.
Oh, I know. Listen, I'm smiling because this is exactly what I love to do. I love to make sure people have an awareness. Foodsafety.gov. That's a website that's kind of sponsored by the federal government, has actually all these recalls kind of on notice. You can subscribe with e-alerts and get an email in your inbox. That's what I do. And then there's lots of stores now, Wegmans, a number of stores where if you have their shopper program, they will also send out alerts to you. And then there's some third-party apps that are all available on kind of the Apple Store, anywhere that you get your apps, so that you can actually try to get alerts in real time. I definitely recommend, if you've got older and younger. We just heard from Ann's reporting about the person that died was unfortunately older with chronic conditions. So if you've got some susceptible people in your household, this is one of those alerts that's worth keeping tabs on. And I also recommend anybody with symptoms, remember, kind of bloody diarrhea, high fever, like bloody stools, excessive vomiting, signs of dehydration, get medical care. You can see symptoms within days after ingesting something with E. coli, and most people do recover within about a week.
I'll be signing up for those notifications now. Doctor, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks.
And we are following some more of that breaking news out of New York City tonight. A police spokesperson now says a third victim in today's stabbing spree across Manhattan has died. Police say that 36-year-old woman was attacked by that homeless man who has been arrested, and records show he has a criminal history that is quite extensive. The 3 victims were attacked in separate locations across New York. And in a separate story, there is a new push in upstate New York for the city of Syracuse to declare a state of emergency over its drinking water. The lead levels there are kind of off the charts right now. The city is insisting the water is safe, but the people NBC's Aaron McLaughlin spoke with say they want answers.
When Oceana Fair's Syracuse home was built back in 1925, lead was in the paint and piping.
This is our water meter.
In 2017, Oceana's eldest granddaughter tested positive for lead poisoning, which she says the county traced to the paint in her home and sealed in the existing lead, seemingly solving the problem.
This is her home. She should be safe here.
But then 2 years later, her second granddaughter, Ella, was born.
Her lead test results came back at 3.5. Being a lead advocate, we knew that we should be concerned.
Oceana says it wasn't until this year that she discovered tap water enters her home through a century-old lead service line. And while it's not confirmed if or to what extent that may have been a factor in Ella's lead level, she's now filtering all drinking water.
So when you realized you had a lead service line, what went through your head? That I had let my grandbaby down. We thought that this house was safe for our grandchildren.
There are 14,000 homes with old lead pipes in Syracuse, according to the city. Piping also seen across the country, from Flint, Michigan to Newark, New Jersey. President Biden has called for all lead piping in the U.S. to be replaced. Each year, the city of Syracuse tests the water from a random sample of those homes for lead. This year, 27 out of 104 properties tested above EPA accepted levels, some way above EPA accepted levels, according to city records obtained by the Natural Resources Defense Council, or NRDC, and reviewed by NBC News. The city now claims tests were improperly administered and said they suspended 2 water department employees, pending an investigation, claiming recent resampling shows numbers below the EPA action level. The city has yet to release those full results.
Syracuse has a significant lead problem.
Eric Olson from the NRDC is sounding the alarm.
For several years, Syracuse has been skating right at the EPA level for lead. We don't believe that the level could have possibly dropped from 70 down to less than 10 in the span of a couple of months. It's just not really possible.
The water in the city of Syracuse is safe.
Greg Lowe is the city's chief policy officer. He says initial samples were taken from outside hoses, inflating lead levels.
It can make a very significant difference in the levels of materials that can be found in a water sample, because that water can be stagnant, sitting there for a long period of time before it's ever used.
The NRDC is calling for Syracuse to declare a state of emergency and to hand out water filters to all homes with lead service lines.
Syracuse, the city, is saying that that initial testing was faulty. What is your response to that?
Well, we say show us the data. We've seen this in city after city. We saw it in Flint. We saw it in other places where the city was reluctant to disclose their data, was testing in a way that was not accurate.
Lowe says he's listening to citizens' concerns.
Let's see it happen.
He says the data from the second round of testing will be released in 7 weeks after the results have been validated by regulatory partners. In the meantime, the city says it's making water filters available to homes with children under 6 and pregnant women.
Why not give the filters to everyone?
Because that isn't what the data shows is necessary.
NBC News knocked on doors of homes that initially tested for high levels of lead.
Okay, so you're drinking this water from the tap?
Yes.
And you have been for 2 years?
Yeah.
Including the residence of college student Hayden Bragg.
This is one of the houses that was found to have inordinately high lead level.
Was it?
Do you not know that?
No, I don't know. I have no idea.
What's happening right now?
We're there when Breg's roommate tells him they received a letter over the summer alerting them to the high lead level.
It said it was high?
Yeah, it was like 57 parts.
But they haven't been told if that was the result of faulty testing, and they're waiting on a second sample.
And you know, like when I was in high school, the whole like Flint, Michigan thing, I never really thought it was going to be about me.
Is it feeling like it's about you now?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, yeah, it is about me. It's about like this whole community.
What a wake-up call. Aaron McLaughlin, thank you. And coming up, as Israel's war with Hezbollah spreads further into Lebanon, archaeologists are worried about how many historical sites may be destroyed in that process. NBC's Danielle Hamamjian takes us there. Hey, welcome back. Let's take a quick look around the world. Protests in France are escalating tonight as talks over a trade deal between European and South American countries are getting pretty contentious. Farmers even used tractors to block traffic. They are saying that the proposed trade deal threatens their livelihoods by allowing South American agriculture produced under weaker environmental standards into their markets. And a stabbing spree at a school in China killed 8 people and hurt 17 others. Now, this happened over the weekend, and police say a former student has been arrested and has since confessed to the killing, saying he was upset about failing an exam and not getting a diploma. And burglars in England have broken into a royal estate. Police say the intruders somehow got inside of Windsor Castle and stole 2 cars. Prince William and Princess Kate live nearby with their family. No one's been arrested, and police say an investigation is still going on. And lawmakers in Denmark want to plant 1 billion trees. Today, they agreed on a deal to do just that, and this deal, which also includes turning 10% of farmland into forests and natural habitats. The Danish government says the massive environmental project will cost about $6 billion. And a big policy reversal by the Biden administration when it comes to the war in Ukraine. President Biden has now given the go-ahead for Ukraine to start using American-made ballistic missiles deep inside of Russia. That's something Ukraine has been asking for quite some time. The move comes as Russia has intensified aerial attacks on Ukraine in just 2 months before President-elect Donald Trump takes office. NBC's Keir Simmons has more.
Well, a furious reaction from the Kremlin to this news that the Biden administration, confirmed by multiple sources to NBC News, has agreed to allow Ukraine to use long-range missiles. It will mean that Ukraine has more of an advantage as it tries to defend itself against what is set to be a major offensive by Russia in the Kursk region to try to push the Ukrainians back out of that Russian territory. It is also risky, and it's being criticized by Donald Trump's son, Donald Trump Jr., for example, who says that it's a step towards World War III. And the danger is that these weapons might cause fatalities or maybe even, for example, hit North Korean soldiers in Russia and escalate the war further. All sides know that there is going to be negotiations, that President-elect Trump wants there to be a deal. Much of this is about positioning themselves ahead of those negotiations expected next year. But certainly many European officials say things could be worse before they get better. Keir Simmons, NBC News.
Keir, thank you. And as the war between Israel and Hezbollah continues, archaeologists in Lebanon are raising concerns over the damage caused to historical sites throughout that country as Israeli airstrikes are wiping out some of the earliest stories there of humanity. NBC's Danielle Hamamjian joins us more.
In southern Lebanon, whether Muslim or Christian, village after village has been destroyed by Israeli airstrikes and ground operations. Israel's war against Lebanese militia Hezbollah has left more than 3,000 dead and counting. The Israeli military vowing to end the group's rocket attacks on northern Israel. But there are fears the incessant bombing will produce another kind of casualty. Take a look at this image. The burnt-out vehicles are a familiar sight by now, except in the background stands the Baalbek temple complex, one of the best-preserved Roman ruins in the world, at least for now.
My heart is breaking. My soul is aching. And the worst part is that we can't do anything but just write reports and beg countries to listen to us.
Lebanon is packed with World Heritage sites like this one here, north of the capital, Beirut, which archaeologists say tells the story of humanity.
We are sitting in a Roman column from the 2nd century and looking at the Bronze Age city from 2,500 years old, and a city wall which is also 3,000 years old. And behind us is the city.
Now, the bombs haven't hit this place here, the ancient port city of Byblos, one of several UNESCO heritage sites that dot this tiny country. But Israeli airstrikes have hit dangerously close to others. This video was taken in the southern city of Tyre by Dr. Nader Siklawi. He was near the Roman ruins he spent his entire career trying to preserve. And as we sit down for an interview in Beirut...
Is that another strike that I just heard? Yeah. So we're about to start, and we've just heard some explosions in the southern suburbs of Beirut.
If we have an enemy looks like Israel, what we can do with him? What we can do?
The IDF says it only targets Hezbollah, but that the group embeds itself in civilian areas, including heritage sites.
And the site, it's opening. There is no building.
There's no Hezbollah presence.
I'm sure. I'm sure.
Archaeologists aren't just worried about direct hits on the monuments. They say blast vibrations could also cause irreparable damage, as could the use of white phosphorus munitions, which the IDF denies using.
It's like a sacred place for me.
Tanya Zavan believes ancient monuments are increasingly becoming casualties of war, pointing to Afghanistan in 2001, when the Taliban destroyed the Bamiyan Buddhas. And then to Syria and Iraq, where Islamic State militants ravaged ancient sites and statues. Both Christians and Muslims here treasure their shared history.
It's not only our history, it's the world history. We are only the keepers of this legacy. We are the keepers of the story of humanity.
Danielle Hamamjin, NBC News, Byblos in Lebanon.
Powerful reporting there, Danielle. Thank you. And before we go, it is time for the future of everything, and we're going to be getting into the future of gaming. Roblox just dropped a bunch of new safety guidelines aimed at keeping kids safer than they were before, but do they do enough? We're going to tell you everything you need to know coming up after the break. And it's tonight's future of everything. The video game company Roblox is adding new protections to its platform for kids. And if you're not familiar, this is not just a game. This is a game universe with a ton of other games. So while your kid might say, hey, Mom, I am playing something totally age appropriate, there's always a chance explicit material could be lurking just around the corner, something that allegedly happened a few years ago with Kim Kardashian and her family.
Look it, this is on Roblox.
What? There was a picture of my cry face, and then I looked at it, and it said something super inappropriate, like Kim's new sex tape. No, it was an inappropriate thing that popped up on his Roblox about me.
Now, Roblox banned the developer in question there and says no explicit footage of Kardashian appeared on the platform, but that was years ago, and now Roblox is adding new parental controls, a move that comes only a month after a research firm says it was prioritizing growth over child safety. Roblox denies a timing coincidence on all this and says new protections were in the works long before that report was released. And that report, parts of that report were absolutely scathing. Let's bring in Wall Street Journal reporter Sarah Needleman to talk more about these guidelines. Sarah, thanks so much for joining us. First off, Roblox is massive. Like, I would argue this is really the closest thing we have to a working metaverse. So before we get into the guidelines, take us through how it works.
Sure. Roblox is a free online platform, and like you described it earlier, it's a big universe full of games. All the games on the platform are made by its own users, and it's like a library of options. It's free. There's all different genres. They're mostly games. Some of them are, they have some other experiences, music, concerts, and whatnot. But it's mostly games, and it's very, very popular. About 88.9 million people log in daily. That's as of September. And it's really popular among kids. About 40% of those are under the age of 13. So it's very popular for young folks as little as 5, 6 years old.
And a lot of them playing side by side with adults, which brings me to the next question. What are the new safety features here?
So there are many new features that they added. One of the most interesting ones is for parents to be able to control on their own devices what's happening. So that on your phone, as a mom or dad, can link to your kid's account, and there you can set limits on what they can play. You can see who they're communicating with, their friends list, for example, and you could set timers, no more playing after, say, 9 p.m., for example. So these are some of the features you see on other phones for children, and now you're seeing the same thing being added to Roblox. And as a parent, you can control that in your own device, so it's not as easy for a kid to go in and change and pretend to be a certain age. Mom and dad should have more control now. Then there's some other changes, like children can no longer text chat with other users outside of games, and that's a way of preventing, or at least limiting the odds, lowering the odds of adults interacting with young folks. But it is free and anyone could log on, and there is that possibility that there are some bad actors going on there. And just like with many of the other social networking apps out there, it's the same thing here.
Yeah, social networking apps is the key word there, because so many people and so many kids say, no, it's just a game, it's just a game, and show one game. Like if you had a middle schooler and they are super savvy about all of this, and you're a parent, what do you need to know before you try to lock things down? Because I can tell you, if I was in middle school, I would be like already trying to crack my parents' password, or possibly just start an account where I was an adult and lie about my age. Are there any protections that prevent that?
Yeah, there are many limitations here, and you can create multiple accounts. So it is possible a child could create an account that a parent isn't aware of. So that's often where it's a matter of having communication and talking to your children and making sure they're aware of the potential dangers. And then as a parent, definitely taking advantage of those controls so you can see who their friends list is. And see who they're talking to and what games they're playing, and make sure they're appropriate. But it is very, very difficult, just like with other forms of social media. And it is a gaming platform, but it is essentially a social networking platform too. And so it is tough. Parents really need to pay attention and keep a close look at what their children are doing on these devices, because anybody could be on there trying to communicate with them. And sometimes it's bad people.
Yeah, as a former pain in my mom's neck, I would say the safest way to go about this is, if you're going to let your kids play, like, you got to play with them, and you got to watch long enough so you really understand the dynamics of all of this. Sarah, I would send you a friend request, but at this point, I'm still lost at how Roblox works. So, Sarah, thank you so much for joining us today.
All right, my pleasure.
And that's going to do it for us tonight. I'm Gadi Schwartz. We'll see you here tomorrow. But until then, stay tuned now.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app, or follow us on social media.